It's that time of year, so here it is, my top 10 pieces of Sapphic content for 2025. First up, I have to talk about one of my favourite shows of the year, which is the UK show The Crow Girl. It's based off a book series, and thankfully there is a season 2 announced because where the first season left off was just too juicy. It's a crime drama about a senior detective, DCI Jeanette Kilburn, who is investigating the body dumping of young men abandoned in strategic places, and as she investigates, she realises it's linked to a cold case her father had worked on years prior. As part of her investigation, she enlists the help of a psychologist, Sophia Craven, and there is a rapport that goes beyond the professional, riotous things are truly breaking down in Jeanette's marriage. Sophia is bisexual, which certainly gets Jeanette's attention, and it looks like there is a serious attraction there. Only we'll have to see how things go in season 2 because as we find out, things have gotten complicated for both of them. I really enjoyed this one. I'm a fan of Eve Miles from Torchwood days, and the complicated dynamic and some twists that I personally didn't see coming, although I know some of you all did, made this a great watch in my book. I did a full review of season 1, see the title cards or the description for a link. Now this next one, Old Guard 2, I have to admit made this list because of the content I watched this year. There wasn't anything else to take its place. It certainly feels like there has been a slowdown of good representation this year, I'll just say that. So Old Guard 2 is a sequel to the well-received first part, The Old Guard from 2020, and sets itself up for a third film, which to date has not yet been greenlit. So I guess approach this with caution if you don't want to be left hanging. This continues the story of a group of immortals who, over the millennia, have found each other and work in the modern day as covert guns for hire. The cover is blown in the first film when there is an attempt to capture them so that the secret of their immortality can be extracted for greedy capitalistic reasons. As part of the film, we're shown flashbacks to the leader of these immortals, Andy, who for so long was alone in the world until she met Quinn. The bond they are shown to have appears to be very close, one might even say Sapphic, and has caused a huge heartache for Andy because Quinn was thrown into the ocean somewhere as part of a witch trial centuries earlier, and she has been unable to find her. In the second film, their love is all but confirmed with a tension-filled reunion and a tentative reconciliation by the end of the movie, which I know some took objection to because it was not confirmed in words. But as far as I'm concerned, there is no real question of what is happening. There was also criticism of how the law around their immortality was deepened, but I personally was good with it, given it clearly requires a third part to complete the story. Fingers crossed for that. Overall, I enjoyed it. I also did a review of this, see the title cards or description for a link. I have something of a fraught relationship with the pairing of Carla and Lisa on Coronation Street, UK's longest running soap, but nowhere near as fraught as some of the other fans of the storyline. We were promised a turbulent year, and in the last few months in particular, they have delivered, and not always in the most satisfying of ways. It makes this list, however, because I, at least, have found the storytelling to be rather delicious and juicy. Last year, they spent a good 9 months or so giving us a slow burn as Carla Connor, resident of Coronation Street for the last 18 years or so, began a friendship that evolved into an attraction for the lesbian cop Lisa Swain. By New Year's last year, they were moved in together, and since then they have been painstakingly building a life together while trying to manage Lisa's deep-seated grief for the loss of her wife some 3 years back, which sees an emotional push and pull with Carla, and Carla's insecurity at being left, stemming from, well, her documented history on the show. The soapy extreme of Carla's brother escaping jail and holding her hostage twice aside, their storyline has given us some lovely relationship building, some good drama, delightful, soft and tender moments culminating in a delightful, light-hearted storyline of Carla trying and failing to propose to Lisa. They spend the year putting all the elements in place just so for what immediately followed the engagement, which of course, it's a soap, is the return of Lisa's wife from the dead, Becky. Only we are shown that she is not the woman that Lisa appeared to be mourning at all. This is where a lot of fans have been upset at how things have progressed, but personally the fact that I've been everything from intensely frustrated with Lisa's trauma response with Becky and how god-awful and manipulative she is, to absolutely charmed at their engagement storyline only shows that it has gotten under my skin, and I can't be mad about that. I'm writing this halfway through December, so anything could happen between now and when this gets posted. There is also the anticipated Coronation Street and Emmerdale crossover episode early January, where Lisa and Carla will both be there in what appears to be an epic explosion. If they stick the landing of pulling together all the threads they've laid out for the couple throughout the year, then the resolution could be pretty amazing in my opinion. So yeah, it made the list. I've done a couple of videos on them already on YouTube, and I recently did a more casual chat about my thoughts on the latest developments over on my Patreon. I'll no doubt be doing more videos there as the story unfolds if you're interested in joining. This next one, The Hunting Wives, also seemed to divide the comment section on my review of Season 1. It's a raunchy Sapphic show that, for all the lesbian activity going on, I will admit does feel pretty straight. It did well for Netflix, so it has been picked up for a Season 2, which apparently is going to be even crazier than Season 1, and Season 1 was wild. It follows Sophie, who has moved from the east coast of the United States to Texas for her husband's job, where she finds herself befriended by Margot and her posse of rich housewives. Margot clearly has designs on her, and they begin a steamy affair, stirring latent desires in Sophie. When there is a murder, she becomes the primary suspect, pushing her towards a break from the conventional life she has lived, exposing some things about herself she's kept hidden. This is a show that is all about the wild titillation and stereotypes. It's by no means a thoughtful, complex story. It's brash, and at the center, it's an intriguing dynamic between our Sapphic ladies. They are kindred spirits in ways you don't immediately clock, but with how the season ends and the revelations made, it's clear that Margot and Sophie are not over. Kill Boksoon is a South Korean film that is not actually from this year, but I watched it this year and I found it intriguing. The Sapphic element is more of a secondary storyline which plays into the primary dynamic of Boksoon, an assassin for hire, and her teenage daughter. The brutality of her job juxtaposes with the domesticity of her home life. She seems unable to bridge the emotional divide between herself and her daughter, and wants to so badly while also killing without a second thought. That is, until she is given a teenager as a target. It's a job that she can't turn down, and it's a career that you can't leave once you're in it. So when she purposefully botches the job, there are consequences that ripple all the way through to her daughter. Her daughter, meanwhile, is hiding her own secret, namely that she is a lesbian and has fallen for her friend, but is unable to tell her mother about it. The bullying that she receives at school will have its own consequences. Now to say, don't worry, the Saphics all make it out alive, and I rather enjoyed the final twist of the movie. There are some fun martial arts action sequences, and the pitting of being an assassin as Boksoon's big secret, juxtaposed against the secret her daughter holds, which is being gay, I thought was an interesting commentary to make because, of course, these things are not equal. It was definitely a standout film that I watched this year. Next on my list is We Are Lady Parts, which is an ongoing comedy TV series with Season 3 due out in 2026. It follows a group of British Muslim women who have formed a band and decide that they need a lead guitarist. The unlikely candidate is Amina. You might recognize the actress from the final season of Killing Eve. She is a biology uni student who teaches guitar on the side but is unable to perform without throwing up. She is, like all her friends, desperately seeking a husband. So when she sees the opportunity to get a date with one of the bandmates' attractive older brother, she agrees to an audition. While at first she seems to be ill-fitted to the punk world, hanging out with her fellow bandmates helps to loosen her up in ways she would have never thought, letting her inner freak fly, if you will. Among the band is Aisha, the drummer, who is a lesbian. In Season 1, she has a relationship with an online magazine owner and social media influencer who writes a think piece on them, and in Season 2, she gets a new love interest that looks like will be longer lasting. Each of the girls in the band get their own storyline, with Aisha revolving around her not only coming to terms with her own sexuality, but dealing with the pressures of coming out to her family and the complicated relationship that she has with that and her culture. The show is a great time with some genuinely good songs and some delightful characters. It was a lovely change of pace from some of the heavier, more dramatic content I watched this year, and I definitely laughed out loud with delight a number of times. Highly recommend. It was not a given that Wicked for Good would make it to this year's top 10, but again, there wasn't anything else to take its place, so here it is. Part 1 made the list last year and it was, in my opinion, much better than the second part. I have a fair few gripes while also eating up all the Sapphic subtext, because yes, it remained in subtext. I wasn't surprised, even if the narrative screamed for it. We are in the times we're in, and even now we are not that far. So I wasn't expecting it. However, I was expecting them to do more to tidy up what is a weaker Act 2 from the stage play musical, and I discussed all of this in my full review, again linked in the description and the title cards. We pick up years after the end of Wicked Part 1, with Glinda now a spokesperson for the wizard and his regime, while Elphaba is exiled on the edge of Oz, doing her best to fight for the animals. When Glinda decides she and Fiyero should marry, it draws Elphaba out of hiding to her balcony on the eve of a wedding, so that's pretty gay, and the consequences of that will change everything between Elphaba and Glinda for good. Now, just like with the Old Guard movies, this is undeniably gay. Of course, there will be people who disagree, but the coding is in there so strongly seated that the opening title sequence is literally the lesbian flag. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. These two closeted disasters that love each other intensely and despite being on the opposite sides of a fascist regime, can't help but continue to love each other. So for all my criticisms of the movie, it's still a world that is living inside my head vibrantly. For a complete change of pace, I have a documentary for you called Lilith Fair, Building a Mystery, a look at the short-lived touring concert created by Canadian singer-songwriter Sarah McLachlan in the late 1990s. It explores how, at the time, women in the music industry were shackled by the belief that no one would come to see an all-female concert, that playing two female artists on the radio back-to-back or having two women on a concert bill shouldn't be done. Feeling called to fight against the misogyny, Sarah convinced some of the biggest female artists in the industry to join her touring concert through the US and Canada, and over the few years that they did this, it became one of, if not the most successful touring concert of all time. Among the artists that joined Sarah were Saphics like the Indigo Girls, Tracy Chapman, Missy Elliott, and more. There is a section in the documentary that specifically talks about the Sapphic ladies. This documentary is not only very well made, guiding us through the journey they took to creating this unique event, but actually left me moved at the power of women collaborating in a world that pushes back so hard on this kind of community building, at the hunger that the audiences had for this kind of work. You may not have heard of Lilith Fair, but you have most certainly benefited from its impact because it opened up the doors for the next generation of women to go further than they could have without it. I definitely recommend. This next one is Sapphic Light in the sense that the canonical out-Sapphic couple are a tertiary storyline. However, there is some very present Sapphic subtext between the two leading ladies that, for those who are fluent in subtext, there are many of us, will enjoy. And look, with season 2 greenlit, maybe the ladies might become more than bosom buddies. After all, this is a Sally Wainwright show, the Sapphic lady responsible for Gentleman Jack. Having said that, perhaps all the innuendos and deep bonding from Beth and Kitty could be a rehash of Caroline and Gillian from Last Tango in Halifax, one of Sally Wainwright's other successful shows, where there was definitely the potential for something to develop and it never went there. Riot Women is about Beth, who is on the verge of topping herself due to the stress of an ill mother who has finally gone into a home, a son who barely calls, and loneliness after her divorce. But then she gets a phone call from a friend who wants to put together a punk band to enter a local talent competition, and the prospect of it is enough to give Beth something to live for. She then stumbles across the perfect lead singer Kitty, who, like Beth, is also struggling from her traumatic life, having just ended an affair with a married man and getting in trouble with the law. Only their connection goes beyond that when they discover something about each other. The friend Jess, who put the band together, discovers that she has a Sapphic daughter who is seeing a woman she doesn't approve of, which makes up a fair amount of her storyline. It's a fun show with some great characters, great performances, well worth a watch in my book. The final entry for this list is Pluribus, slipped in just before the end of the year with its powerful multi-dimensional storytelling. It follows Carol, a romantasy novelist that is finishing a book tour for the latest book in her series with her wife and manager Helen. She seems to disdain her own work and the fans who love it, but it has also afforded her and Helen a comfortable life. All of this is upended, however, when she watches Helen go into seizure and fall backwards onto the pavement, injuring her head. Only it's not just Helen, it's everyone in the bar they were just in. It's the upturned cop car she sees while on her way to the hospital. It's every single person in the hospital too. The seizure ends, but everyone is transformed. They are all connected to a hive mind now. A signal picked up from over 600 years away was decoded, and it spread a virus that strips everyone of their individuality. All humans are now one. That is, except for Carol and a few others. She must now grapple with a world that has changed in an instant, a world without her love, and the knowledge that every person in the world has been stripped of their autonomy, individuality, and personhood, while this human collective seeks to not just befriend her, but to make her one of them. From this premise comes so many ways that this story can be interpreted. It can be seen as being about the queer experience, of being the odd one out in a sea of homogeny. It can be about the alienation of grief, because unfortunately Helen doesn't survive her injury, which this is one of the times I wasn't massively upset about a Bury Your Gaze. It's about anger, betrayal, it's about loneliness, it's about happiness. It's a story of religious trauma, or any trauma actually, of learning to open the self up, of how sometimes it takes cataclysmic events that forces change, and how we can be dragged kicking and screaming towards that change. It's a story of exploring the push and pull between individualism versus community. It's about consent, or lack thereof, abusive and manipulative relationships, resistance to hegemony or any other major force that looks to shape who you are in the world. This is what makes this show so powerful, is that it is multi-layered and nuanced, allowing for a plethora of interpretations and meanings that can be read into the story, depending on how you personally interpret Carol and the Hive, and they're all legitimate. Best of all, the protagonist is a Sapphic lady, and the woman, Xersha, sent by the hive mind to handle her, is perfectly calibrated to appeal to Carol, because she is the female version of her debonair leading man from her novel, who was meant to be a woman before she censored herself for the sake of appealing to the masses. Xersha, who Carol later on admits is so very fuckable. So to say that there be some woman-loving woman activity going on. Highly recommend this one. It's for sure my favourite piece of Sapphic content for this year, for some of the most masterful, clever storytelling I've seen in a good long while. I have done a full review on this one as well. I would love to hear what content really captured your imagination this year in the comments. Happy New Year, and until next time, lady lovers.